Is this on? Yeah. Thank you so much. So today, as Chris said, my name is Ailis. I'm going to be talking you through the trends that we're really seeing, we've seen this year, and the trends yet to come. And we're also going to be thinking about how the consumer thinks. I know Chris touched on it there, but this is really impacting their decisions, what it means for them in terms of the products, what excites them, and what they're really going to be looking for. So overall, just a little agenda of the presentation today. First of all, just going to introduce you to trend architecture, which you may know. Then we'll do a recap of big ideas for 2022 and looking ahead for 2023. And then we'll be looking at what's next in terms of trends, what's coming up to look out for, and finally some key takeaways to really think what is really important to take away from this session. So first of all, introducing the trend architecture. So some of you may have already seen this before, but essentially this is a system used to define creative trends that we use at WGSN and across many different designs businesses as well. And it's really helpful to classify and sort of appeal if we're looking at large audiences or more sort of niche and innovative audiences as well. So beginning on the left-hand side here, we have protect, and that's really thinking about those mass trends, really commercial appeal, really having those sort of sales-driven trends are going to be fitting in here, those sort of ideas and items that are going to really fit into any home. Next, we have invest. This is more sitting on those sort of season, sort of must-have items, really having a bit more of a trend-driven appeal for this. So thinking about trending colors, trending prints, patterns are really going to fall into the invest trends. And then finally, we have test. So this is really thinking about those wow trends, those pieces that are going to work across social media, really going to be capturing the attention, but they are a bit more aspirational rather than inspirational. So working across a few of these today, we're going to go through the trends that fit into each of these categories. So beginning with a recap on 2022. And firstly, we're going to look at the consumer context. This is where all our sort of brainstorming and ideas really start from at WGSN, and it's really what eventually drives those trends. So when you see the cottagecore trend, you have a bit of understanding of where that's actually come from and why this is really trending at this moment. So first of all, these are the sort of 4 trends that have the consumer context of 2022, beginning with rediscovering roots. So this was all about consumers during the pandemic, really took time to really think about what their values are, what really matters to them, the sort of recouping consumers had. And they came out in 2022 with this new idea about what they really value and sort of a better understanding of what really means, what life means to them, who they are. And this has sort of prompted different ideas around heritage, around appreciation for sort of indigenous creativities, looking at nostalgia, thinking about looking back to that and looking for sort of that joy and optimism in things that sort of have that element of sort of mundanity in them as well. This moves on to our second consumer driver, which is free imaginations. And this is really about joy and unyielding creativity for causes that really matter for the consumer. So thinking about sort of queer pride, thinking about the climate, thinking about equality, all of these issues that really matter to the consumer, and bringing a sense of joy and optimism and enthusiasm for them is really pushing this trend. Then we have transitional lifestyles. As Chris mentioned, consumers are sort of working from home so much more now. We have a massive shift. People went from working for 5 days a week in the office now to 3 or even none. And this just really has a massive impact, especially for you guys, as to what consumers are revaluing in their home and their spaces and what this space means to them. And that just really means that everything in their home has the potential to become public. And that just means everything is a lot more considered. And this is definitely having a direct impact on what they're buying. Finally, we have ordinary optimism. So this is sort of an antidote to all of that doom scrolling. There is so much going on in the world at the moment, and it's just overwhelming consumers at the moment, and they're really looking for sort of an antidote to this continuous doom scrolling and finding a sort of new perspective and new appreciation for small moments in a day, and looking for that sort of new kind of joy in those small things that previously might have been overlooked. So whether that's a holiday you haven't had in a while, or just sort of small things such as purchasing something. I know recently I purchased like dividers for my drawers that brought me so much joy. So just having those ordinary things really bringing joy to the consumer is really shifting that perspective. So here's a recap for the key trends which eBay shared over 2022. A little note here that the imagery is from eBay and there's some from the shops. They've all been credited, so you might see your imagery in these slides. But just a quick overview of the trends that we saw throughout this year. So first of all, cottagecore. I'm sure we can't ignore this one anymore, but this was all really about slow living in the city, thinking about vintage maximalism and also sort of floral designs really coming in here. Next, we had modern retro. This is really having a bit more of a contemporary appeal to nostalgia. Really, we saw the revival of sort of mid-century styles, sort of mid-century, that nice colouring coming through there, and through materials and fabrics as well, having sort of soft curves and simple silhouettes really coming through for that trend. We then had luxe industrial. This is, as it says, having that bit of edge to luxury, really looking at material coming in here, so sort of having those metals as well, and having sort of a level of minimalism, but alongside those rich fabrics. So it's not about being overly flashy, but having that sort of elevated luxury. Then we had cozy living. This is coming from the Scandinavian trends. Obviously, those tactile textures are really key here, and it's really about that cocooning style, and again, colouring and those natural colours were really important for this trend. Then we had living outdoor indoor, pretty self-explanatory, but consumers, obviously prompted by the pandemic, having these lives sort of shifting in their homes, working outdoors and indoors, and having that more seamless relationship between the two. And therefore, they were looking for those products, and still are looking for those products that work both indoor and outdoor. Then we had craft connection. So this is really about supporting local artistry, craftsmanship, thinking about natural finishes, natural materials, really coming through here, and really consumers considering the craft within an item. Brights, almost our last trend here, of course, fun, playfulness really coming through here, that idea of dopamine maximism really coming through here, and having that sense of joy through furnishings. And then finally, antique accents. So this was all about having those vintage and subtle antique accents sitting alongside some of those sort of more modern styles as well. So here, the impact this had across eBay, they made a massive effort to amplify customer attention to this and really deliver a sense of focus for sort of the massive assortment that eBay has. And this really resulted in over 200 homepage banners in 2022, which really created that sort of system for consumers to search through, and having those sort of trend programs such as those shoppable tabs. They had Coastal Grandma, that sort of 70s trend there, and this just really demonstrated that consumers really are responding to this, and they had over 177 million impressions. So really looking at how consumers are shifting to this trend-led shopping. And this is sort of impacting how they're filtering through, how they're designing, and how they're thinking about buying. Also, on that social media side, we had over 50 pieces of influencer content was created with eBay, and this is really channeling that sort of aspirational aspect for consumers, looking for those influencers and those people. They had Fern Cotton, Louise Rowe, and Ollie Alexander, all having sort of curated edits, which help consumers, again, to get through and really reach these sort of styles and trends that they're looking for. And there are, of course, more coming towards the end of the year. We are not done yet. So now moving on to 2023, and again beginning with those big ideas and that consumer context, which is really important in driving this trend. So firstly, we have simpler sustainability. So this is really thinking about those climate events. We have the heat waves, we've had droughts, we've had so many different climate events that really means that consumers are no longer sort of able to ignore the climate changes that's happening now, and are really looking for those solutions for this. We actually have seen this year is the first year that the intention action gap, which means those consumers who say they want to buy or spend more on sustainable items, and then those who actually do, is actually closing and becoming a lot more real. So consumers are really looking to brands, to products that are really doing the work for them, that are showing that they are speaking to their sustainability concerns, and means when they shop, they can shop with confidence and know that this aligns with their concerns in terms of sustainability. Next, we have function meets form, and I think across all our forecasting, the rise of cost of living is really impacting consumers, of course, and this is really where that trend comes through, where despite consumers really looking for functional items, they are still looking for items that please them, items that they really want to have in their home. As Chris said, they are still looking for those style despite having this. And just with the cost of living now, it just means that their expectations are just meaning when they want a product that is also functional, they also want it to look well in terms of style. And they're really looking for that versatility in products that work across different categories. So products which can work as a vase and then can work as a pencil holder as such. So really thinking about versatility within items, having that functional pieces, but then also having something that the consumer really can appreciate and care about and give value to if they're spending their money on it. Then we have playfully punk, alliteration there. So this is really thinking about how consumers are so overwhelmed with content. There's so much they're fed with daily through social media, through all the different platforms. It gets really overwhelming to see what they really are filtering through and what they really want. And this trend is really about having that edge, showing something new, showing something they're not expecting to really sort of cut through the noise and really going to be challenging in that way to really go further and grab their attention for this. They are overstimulated, so this is about that idea of provocation, really catching their attention. And then finally, we have everyday healing. So this is really thinking about how wellness is going to be imbued in sort of every aspect of life. Thinking about sort of mental health and physical health is now just something that consumers thinking about daily. It's very part of their life, and this means that it's going to have a massive impact on product. What does this product serve? What function does this product serve? Does it bring me joy? Of course, Marie Kondoing everything they buy is really going to land on this function for the product. And how does it benefit me, or how does it work to enable my wellness? So moving on to our trends now, we have 2 trends per pillar, looking at that trend architecture. So beginning with hospitality home. Oh, a note here, also the bubbles on the screen are showing sort of those eBay shoppers filters when they're shopping. So this is really bringing the trends to life and seeing how these actually fit within eBay. So first of all, we have hospitality home. This is really thinking about the indulgence you have when you enter a hotel, when you're on holiday. That sort of level of hospitality is really going to be brought into the home as consumers are having this new appreciation for the home. And this is inspiring sort of those gentle colour schemes, carefully curated places that really define sort of the private place and the public space as well. We've included a trend guide on here as well. As Chris said, you will receive this after so you can go through it. But just to touch on some key points here, really drawing influences from that relaxing environment of nature-based wellness resorts is really going to bring that sense of indulgence to the trend as well. Healing colours, as I mentioned, you can see that colour palette there is very soft and healing, and that's really feeding into that wellness-focused environment. And then textures, really portraying the sense of calm is going to be key. For products as well, we're thinking about those multifunctional cushions, sheer drapes you can see there, also those sort of room dividers, dried flower displays, and such, really adding to this idea of sort of hospitality within the home. We've also included a what it isn't here, so this is really not about sterile textures or darkly lit rooms, it's about freshness and that sense of comfort. Next, we have new organics. This also sits in that protect level of the trend architecture. This is really thinking about those natural materials, having a bit more of a rougher texture coming through here actually, and also handcrafted shapes really coming through here, really taking that center stage as sustainability, of course, shifts from design to lifestyle demand. The trend guide for this one, really thinking to tap into that readiness to play for an environment and adding those sort of sustainable products, really having a new edge to them and having sort of that sense of luxury as well, sort of shifting the perception of sort of sustainable products from previously sort of those rustic styles, instead having that elevated look whilst meeting those credentials. Applicable products for this one, really thinking about organic composite rugs, thinking about the materials that make up those products, patchwork quilts and throws as well coming through here. Crochet is a really nice texture, and weave sort of storage baskets as well, really popular coming into this trend. And then what it isn't here, it's not sort of those monotones, it's really bringing those sort of soft colours, those earthy colours through in here as well. So moving on to that invest sort of more trend-led level of the trend architecture, we have reclaimed romance. And this is really thinking about that healing power of nostalgia and reassuring romance that we're really seeing come through here, sort of channeling that new energy for vintage bohemia and really evoking comfort through familiarity as well, through these more sort of subtle role. The trend guide here, you can see from the imagery as well, it's really about those sort of delicate florals coming through here. The palette is really soft, kind of pastel-y, but having those accents as well coming in with that green fig colour as well. Thinking about sort of milky, translucent colours, you can see in those bowls and plates there, really nice kind of texture coming through there. It almost gives it a bit of a retro feel as well. And then also for products for this one, really thinking about sort of those more indulgent pieces, those decorative plates, vases, glass tableware as well, and even sort of more dreamy, silky wall hangings. I'm really going to add to that styling of this sort of theme. And then finally what it isn't about those kitschy florals. This is a more sophisticated move on from that. It's not sort of those overstated commercial designs. It's a bit more refined and, as we said, reclaimed romance. Next, we have the second trend for Invest, which is future industrial. So this is sort of a move on from that luxe industrial trend that we had for 2022. And it's really about uplifting that light and colour from that sort of classic industrial style and then imbuing that in sort of ordinary styles with a really approachable sense of luxury. So here it's really thinking about old meets new, marrying them together in a really easy way. The trend guide for this one is thinking about those juxtapositions, so thinking about metals coming through here against more sort of symbolic, spiritual, sort of ceremonial sources as well. Then also textiles here, really favouring that sort of high sheen finishes to give it that luxury feel as well, but also combined with more fluid, sleek and considered edges as well. The products for this, thinking about decorative mirrors, are a really great place to start. Also at-home sort of hardware such as copper coffee makers, mugs, all of that is really going to feed in nicely here. And finally also sort of wall-mounted lighting, really going to tap in nicely to that industrial side of the trend. What it isn't here, it's not that overly cold, it's not that sort of slightly mild-toned metals and polished surfaces. Instead, it's really about having that freshness. And then finally for our two test trends, we have digital diffusion. This is really thinking about blurring those boundaries between the real and the virtual with sort of softly surreal designs and really super smooth finishes as well that are really sort of begging to be touched and have that tactility coming through here. So normally when you think about sort of the digital, this has a lot more of a softer and diffused appeal to it. Of course, we can't ignore the metaverse is really coming into everyday language, and that influence of the digital is really going to be impacting in the interior space. So thinking about high tech meeting that soft side, referencing sort of the unnaturally perfect as well, really going to marry together those online environments as well. Colour is really key here with more sort of cheeky interpretation of those powdery rainbows coming through, the soft pastels and also those more muted tones as well. Textiles are really going to be inducing those sort of initiatives here for touch, so thinking about fuzzy textures as really key here, as well as sort of more ultra plush materials. The products, tinted transparency glassware as well, thinking about sort of tiered ombre home linens as well, going to come through here nicely, and then again those sort of plush cushions and throws, as you can see in that imagery, work really nicely. And then finally, our last trend for test is merry maximalism. So this is really thinking about those unexpected details and sort of striking materials, really delivering sort of a really great statement really to those interior spaces and elevating those more mundane objects and giving a bit more of special meaning to those sort of everyday rituals. So the trend guide here, really thinking about surprising consumers there, thinking about those overstimulated consumers and giving them something new, looking sort of more bold pattern and colour for everyday ranges as well, and changing that relationship with these objects, sort of turning the sort of furniture into sort of more feature pieces as well. Colour here, you can see it's a lot louder, having this sort of more engineered colour clashing and focusing on sort of saturation with colour as well. So not necessarily going into the neons, but thinking about really nicely saturated colour. Also dial-upping details, so sort of beadwork, flounces, and really subverting expectations as well here by applying those sort of precious materials to those more banal and small items. Products here, decorative tissue boxes are a really nice way to start, adding that sense of luxury and joy within those sort of more overlooked items. Also boldly patterned bath towels, really nice place to start as well as shower curtains as well. So looking into what's next now, so those trends we're looking sort of 2023 and looking a little bit further beyond that. So perhaps if you have more sort of interaction with the design of products, this is going to give a bit of a preview into what's next. So this is a quote from our design team at WGSN, and they say, in 2024, the design economy will be energized by an outpouring of post-pandemic creativity and a unique opportunity to do things differently. So thinking about existing codes of aesthetics and behavior are definitely going to be challenged and giving way to a do-it-your-way mindset. So a bit of a shift on from do-it-yourself. So this is really having that consumer sentiment which is driving that future of design. So ideas of individuality and self-expression are really going to drive how both consumers and designers alike are going to see the world. So the consumer evolution, just a recap here, we saw 2022 was really about rediscovery, so crawling out of those ideas of familiarity we had during the pandemic, recouping our senses and rediscovering sort of what understanding of the world is and what that means for us. Then we had 2023, which will be reclamation. This is about consumers really standing up for what they believe in and demanding that change and having a bit more of an active pursuit in that. And then finally, we have 2024 coming, which will be about revision. So no longer just really thinking about change, but really about taking action themselves and having really a thoughtful process for this. So a quick sneak peek into what that means for the trends for 2024. We have creative confidence, which is really thinking about bringing that energy, bringing that expression into interiors through those vibrant patterns, through that more confident colours, and aesthetic and material contrast, all really rooted in a sense of purpose rather than excess. Next, we have sensescapes. So this is really about celebrating immersive designs and really thinking about those sort of more fantastical surfaces coming through there, shape-shifting forms, that influence in the metaverse really growing for 2024 and having that sort of otherworldliness to design will really be exciting there, blurring those lines between the virtual and the digital. And then finally, we have protect and connect. So this is really about championing those calming sides of design, caring and comforting elements and spaces, and really having a focus on products and spaces that support well-being, healing, decluttering, all of those sort of elements of wellness really coming through here, and really processes that safeguard customs, cultures, and habitats. So finally, we have some key takeaways just to summarize all of the points we've come across through today. I know there was a lot of information in there, so just the sort of 4 key takeaways for you to remember. Firstly, thinking about the transitional, really championing the transitional and considering the consumer and their sort of new ways of unpredictable living post-pandemic. It's no longer really about how we used to live, and there is definitely sort of an unpredictable level for consumers, and that means the products they want are going to really come back to that functionality, having to adapt as well. So products should really be celebrated in this transitional lifestyle, functionality that similarly shares that idea of multi-purpose as well, be it across sort of rooms or across usages as well. Secondly, adding intent to wellness. So really adding sort of sustainability and self-care, issues of intention are really sort of driving consumer concerns and demand for products that are really going to enable this sense of wellness, both in design as well as in performance. Again, we see that duality of the product need coming through. This can be supported by supplying pieces that sort of allow consumers to feel that they are making better decisions in terms of sustainability, but also products that are just going to speak to them in terms of an investment that they will have for a long time. Thirdly, curate for all senses. So our current state of phygital living really makes it important to stimulate sort of all 5 senses. As we're getting overstimulated all the time, it's really important that this speaks to us across those senses. So whether that's tactility, really coming through as just important as appearances. Adding joy also by playing up those textures in design is really going to take that feel of touchability as well. And then finally, leveraging eBay activations, of course, really maximizing the exposure to your profiles by keeping sort of note and participating in these numerous trend programs that eBay are really excitingly planned for this year and for the following year as well. So lastly, please visit the Home and Garden stand, which is downstairs, to learn more about these eBay trends and programs. And thank you so much for listening. It's been a pleasure talking to you.